As you're probably aware, the human population is growing and is set to reach over 9 billion by 2050. Now, as the population increases, so does the demand for food, and particularly meat. And that causes several different problems. Firstly, in terms of the environment, because whether we're farming crops or livestock, there will be increasing negative effects on land, water, and greenhouse gas emissions. Now, in terms of human welfare, we'd have to make sure that everybody has enough nutritious food to eat, so that's an issue. And also, another problem is antibiotic resistance, which is linked to livestock farming. And thirdly, animal welfare, because one solution to an increase in demand for food is to intensify animal farming, which is not good for the animals. Another issue is that you might see more land being cleared, which will affect wildlife and also biodiversity. There are lots of different solutions to this problem, but the one that I'm interested in, and the one that is backed by the United Nations, is insects for food and animal feed. Now, most people are surprised when I tell them that insects are actually very nutritious. If you take something like mealworms or crickets, they contain about the same amount of protein as chicken. They're also high in calcium, iron, B vitamins, and omega fatty acids. Now, in Europe and North America, we're quite unusual for not eating insects as part of a traditional diet, because about 80% of the world's countries do actually eat insects in some form. Most of the time it's a snack, and it's often considered a delicacy and more expensive than something like chicken. There are about 2,000 species of insects eaten across the world, and they taste anything from mushrooms to pistachio nuts to lemon or honey. And I was feeding some people some bugs last night at the gala, and they said, it tastes like Bombay mix, or it tastes like pork scratchings or wheaty crisps. So people tend to like them. I mostly cook with mealworms and crickets, and I go to events, and I turn them into things like meatballs or falafel, and people generally tend to enjoy them. The reason for farming insects is that it's a good way to get protein, but it's also better for the environment than traditional meats such as beef or chicken. Now, if you take the example of beef versus crickets, to get 1 kilogram of beef, you need more land, water, and feed, and generate more greenhouse gas emissions than you do for crickets. The crickets, you only need 8 litres of water, but for cows, you need 20,000 litres, so it's a huge difference. The other really cool thing about insects is, unlike cows and pigs, you can stack them, so you don't really need as much space and you can be quite efficient. In terms of welfare, insects' needs are easily met for food, water, shelter, light, and you don't have aversive procedures like beak clipping, castration, or dehorning. Now, to make insect eating more mainstream, there are 2 problems. Firstly is encouraging people to eat insects in the West. And that's tricky because in one survey I did of 53 university students, I found about 50% said they wouldn't try insects, and the reasons were that it's disgusting or it would taste bad. So that's something to tackle. Another problem is maintaining insect farming or insect eating where it's common, but where it might be in decline. So, for instance, in Thailand, cultural influence of Western ideals about food are changing people's attitudes towards eating insects because people want to eat more red meat. Also, insect eating might be in decline there because of changes in habitat and pesticides, and these are contributing to over-farming, over-harvesting of wild insects. So one solution to that is to encourage sustainable farming of things like crickets instead of wild harvesting. Now, to kind of put that into a framework to see how we might be able to change behaviours, we use the combi model. So a barrier towards the behaviour change might be, for instance, having no capability. So you might not be aware that insects are highly nutritious, or you might not be able to farm because you're not physically fit. The opportunity might not be available because you don't have enough money to start a farm, or because, I forgot my other one. Oh yeah, sometimes there's a social judgments. So for instance, one family I met at one of my food stalls, they came over and they looked really disgusted at the food and they walked off. Their teenage daughter came back several times looking really curious, and eventually she tried something, but not in front of her parents because they were judgmental. And also motivation. People have to believe that if they're going to farm, they will actually make some money, and if they're going to eat insects, it will be tasty. I've recently been in Thailand and Laos interviewing people about their attitudes towards eating insects and to farming. So now the next job for me to do is to work out what the main reasons for not exhibiting particular behaviours are, to see if there's some kind of intervention that I could use. So thank you very much.